Have you ever felt like you're running in circles? No matter how hard you try to move forward, that sense of being stuck, as if something invisible is holding you back from reaching your full potential, can be incredibly frustrating. You probably tried countless strategies, read books, followed advice, and yet there's still that lingering feeling that something is missing. What if the key to unlocking your success and fulfillment has been hidden in plain sight for centuries? In the first part of this series, we began uncovering the profound, hidden secrets of Isaiah, ancient wisdom that has stood the test of time. These insights have the power to illuminate paths that once seemed unclear, offering guidance that feels almost tailor-made for the challenges we face today. Now, in part 2, we're taking this journey even deeper. This isn't just about theory or abstract ideas. This is about actionable wisdom that you can apply right now to transform your life. Whether you're struggling with self-doubt, feeling overwhelmed by obstacles, or simply searching for a clearer sense of direction, the teachings we're about to explore can help you break through those barriers. Imagine being able to tap into a source of strength and clarity that has guided generations before you. Imagine finally understanding how to align your actions with timeless principles that lead to success, peace, and purpose. If you're ready to stop repeating the same patterns and start creating real, lasting change, this video is for you. Together, we'll uncover how these ancient truths can be your roadmap to overcoming challenges, achieving your goals, and living a life of deeper meaning. Let's dive in and discover how Isaiah's hidden secrets can transform your life. Starting today, what about you? Had you heard this story before? Did you know it existed? Drop a comment if you knew this part of the story, because in the next videos, there will be a series of content that will tell you more about even more Bible characters. Isaiah reveals prophecies about the fall of powerful empires. The air was thick with tension in the kingdom of Judah. The people had grown complacent, their hearts drifting far from the God who had delivered them time and time again. Into this atmosphere of spiritual decline stepped Isaiah, a prophet chosen by God to deliver messages that would echo through the ages. His words were not just for his time, they were for generations to come, including ours. Isaiah stood before the people, his voice steady yet filled with urgency. He spoke of a world where powerful empires, like the mighty Assyria, seemed unstoppable. Assyria was a force to be reckoned with, a brutal, conquering nation that had swept through the region, leaving destruction in its wake. Its armies were feared, its kings arrogant, and its reach seemed endless. To many, it appeared as though no one could stand against them. But Isaiah revealed a truth that shook the foundations of human understanding. These empires, no matter how powerful they seemed, were not beyond the reach of God's justice. Assyria, with all its pride and cruelty, was not invincible. Isaiah proclaimed that their strength was nothing compared to the sovereignty of the Almighty. Woe to the Assyrian, the rod of my anger, Isaiah declared, quoting the very words of God, in whose hand is the club of my wrath. Isaiah 10 verse 5. Assyria was merely an instrument in God's hands, a tool to bring judgment upon nations that had turned away from him. But here's the twist. Assyria's own arrogance and cruelty would lead to its downfall. Isaiah painted a vivid picture of divine judgment. He described how Assyria, drunk with its own power, would overstep its boundaries. They would boast, "By the strength of my hand I have done this, and by my wisdom, because I have understanding," Isaiah 10 verse 13. But God would not tolerate such pride. Isaiah prophesied that the Lord would bring a fire upon Assyria's forests, reducing their glory to ashes. Their mighty army, once feared by all, would be struck down like a tree felled by an axe. The prophet's word were not just a warning to Assyria. They were a reminder to Judah and to all who would hear them. God is the ultimate authority. No empire, no matter how vast or powerful, can stand against his will. Isaiah's message was clear. Pride leads to destruction, but humility and obedience to God bring protection and peace. As the people listened, some trembled, while others scoffed. How could this be? Assyria was at the height of its power, seemingly unstoppable. But Isaiah's prophecies were not based on human logic. They were divine revelations. And true to his words, history would later show the dramatic fall of Assyria, just as God had declared. This story isn't just about ancient empires. It's about us. It's a reminder that no matter how powerful or invincible something may seem in our lives, whether it's a challenge of fear or even our own pride, it is nothing compared to the power and justice of God. Isaiah's message calls us to examine our hearts, to turn away from arrogance, and to trust in the one who holds all things in his hands. So, as we dive deeper into Isaiah's prophecies, let's ask ourselves, where do we place our trust? In the fleeting strength of the world or in the eternal power of God? The fall of Assyria is a powerful testament to the truth that no empire, no obstacle, and no force can stand against the will of the Almighty. And that's a truth worth holding on to no matter what we face today. Isaiah highlights God's sovereignty over all nations and the justice he brings upon oppressors. The world Isaiah lived in was one of chaos and uncertainty. Empires rose and fell, kings waged wars, and the cries of the oppressed often went unheard. Yet, in the midst of this turmoil, Isaiah stood as a beacon of divine truth, proclaiming a message that transcended the politics and power struggles of his time. His words were a powerful reminder. God is sovereign over all nations, and his justice will prevail. Isaiah's prophecies were not just about the fate of individual nations. They were about the character of God himself. He revealed a God who is not distant or detached, but actively involved in the affairs of humanity. This is a God who sees the suffering of the oppressed, hears the cries of the marginalized, and will not remain silent in the face of injustice. Take Assyria, for example. To the people of Judah, Assyria was a terrifying force, a nation that had built its empire on violence, exploitation, and cruelty. They were the bullies of the ancient world, conquering nations and leaving devastation in their wake. But Isaiah made it clear that Assyria's power was not their own. It was given to them by God, and it could be taken away just as easily. Woe to the Assyrian, the rod of my anger, Isaiah declared, echoing God's words. I send him against a godless nation. I dispatch him against the people who anger me, to seize loot and snatch plunder, and to trample them down like mud in the streets. Isaiah 10 verses 5-6. Assyria was nothing more than an instrument in God's hands, a tool to bring judgment upon nations that had turned away from him. But here's the catch. Assyria didn't see it that way. They believed their success was due to their own strength and cunning. They boasted, by the strength of my hand I have done this, and by my wisdom, because I have understanding, Isaiah 10 verse 13. Their pride blinded them to the truth that their power was temporary and conditional. Isaiah's prophecy was a stark warning. God would not tolerate such arrogance. When the Lord has finished all his work against Mount Zion and Jerusalem, Isaiah declared, he will say, I will punish the king of Assyria for the willful pride of his heart and the haughty look of his eyes, Isaiah 10 verse 12. The very nation that had been used as an instrument of judgment would itself face judgment. This theme of divine justice runs throughout Isaiah's message. He didn't just focus on Assyria. He also spoke of other nations, Babylon, Moab, Philistia, and more, each of which would face the consequences of their actions. But Isaiah's message wasn't just about punishment. It was about restoration. God's justice is always tempered with mercy. For those who repent and turn back to him, there is hope. Isaiah's words remind us that no nation, no leader, and no power is beyond God's reach. He is the ultimate authority, the one who raises up kingdoms and brings them down. His justice is perfect, and his timing is impeccable. While it may seem like the wicked prosper and the innocent suffer, Isaiah assures us that God sees it all, and he will act. For us today, this message is both a comfort and a challenge. It's a comfort to know that no matter how chaotic the world may seem, God is in control. He sees the injustices we face, and he will not let them go unpunished. But it's also a challenge to examine our own lives. Are we, like Assyria, rely on our own strength and wisdom? Are we ignoring the sovereignty of God in our pursuit of power, success, or security? Isaiah's prophecies call us to humble ourselves before the Almighty, to recognize his sovereignty over every aspect of our lives, and to trust in his justice. They remind us that while the world may celebrate power and pride, God values humility, righteousness, and faithfulness. So, as we reflect on Isaiah's message, let's ask ourselves, where do we place our trust? In the fleeting strength of human empires, or in the eternal power of the God who holds all nations in his hands? The story of Assyria's rise and fall is a powerful testament to the truth that God's justice will prevail, and his sovereignty will never be shaken. And that's a truth worth building our lives upon. Let's go to the first secret. But first, just check if you're subscribed to the channel. Because in the next videos, there will be a series of content that will tell you more about various Bible characters. Isaiah envisions a kingdom of peace, justice, and universal renewal. As Isaiah stood before the people, his words carried a weight that transcended the immediate struggles of his time. While he spoke of judgment and the fall of powerful empires, his vision didn't end there. Isaiah's prophecy stretched far into the future, painting a breathtaking picture of a world transformed, a kingdom of peace, justice, and universal renewal that would one day come to pass. This vision was not just a fleeting dream. It was a divine promise. Isaiah saw a time when the brokenness of the world would be healed, when oppression would cease, and when even nature itself would be restored to its original harmony. It was a vision so profound, so beautiful, that offered hope not only to the people of his day, but to all generations who would come after. One of the most striking images Isaiah presents is that of the peaceable kingdom. He describes a world where predators and prey live together in harmony, where violence and fear are no more. The wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. Isaiah 11 verse 6. This poetic imagery isn't just about animals. It's a symbol of a world restored to its intended order, where conflict and division are replaced by unity and peace. But Isaiah's vision goes even further. He speaks of a ruler who will come, a descendant of Jesse, the father of King David, who will reign with wisdom, justice, and righteousness. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the spirit of counsel and of might, the spirit of the knowledge and fear of the Lord. Isaiah 11 verse 2. This leader will not rule with the arrogance and cruelty of earthly kings, but with humility and fairness. He will defend the poor, uphold the rights of the vulnerable, and bring justice to the oppressed. Isaiah's vision of this future kingdom is not limited to humanity. He describes a world where even the natural order is restored. The desert and the parched land will be glad. The wilderness will rejoice and blossom. Like the crocus, it will burst into bloom. It will rejoice greatly and shout for joy. Isaiah 35 verses 1 to 2. The barren places will become fertile, and the dry land will overflow with water. This imagery of renewal speaks to a creation that has been groaning under the weight of sin and brokenness, finally set free and restored to its original glory. For the people of Isaiah's time, this vision was a source of hope. They lived in a world filled with violence, injustice, and uncertainty. Empires rose and fell, and the future often seemed bleak. But Isaiah's prophecies reminded them that God's plans were far greater than their present circumstances. They pointed to a future where God's kingdom would reign supreme, where his justice would prevail, and where his peace would cover the earth like a blanket. For us today, Isaiah's vision is just as relevant. We live in a world that often feels broken, a world of conflict, inequality, and environmental degradation. Isaiah's words remind us that this is not the end of the story. God's plan is one of restoration, not just for humanity, but for all of creation. This vision challenges us to live with hope and purpose. It calls us to be agents of God's kingdom here and now, to seek justice, to care for the vulnerable, and to steward the earth with wisdom and compassion. While we may not see the full realization of Isaiah's vision in our lifetime, we can trust that God is at work, bringing about his ultimate plan of renewal. Isaiah's prophecies are a reminder that the future is not left to chance. God is sovereign, and his promises are sure. The kingdom of peace, justice, and universal renewal that Isaiah envisioned is not just a distant dream. It is a certainty, guaranteed by the faithfulness of God. So, as we reflect on Isaiah's vision, let's allow it to inspire us. Let's live with hope, knowing that God's kingdom is coming. Let's work toward justice and peace, trusting that our efforts are part of something much bigger. And let's hold on to the promise that one day, the world will be made new, and every tear will be wiped away. This is the future Isaiah saw, and it's a future we can look forward to with confidence and joy. Isaiah prophesies a time when God will gather all nations to worship him. Isaiah's prophecies are like a tapestry, weaving together threads of judgment, hope, and restoration. One of the most remarkable threads in this tapestry is his vision of a future time when God will gather all nations, even former enemies, to worship him together. This is not just a fleeting image. It's a profound declaration of God's ultimate plan for humanity. In a world divided by borders, cultures, and conflicts, Isaiah's vision is radical. He speaks of a day when the divisions that separate people will be overcome, and all nations will come together in unity to honor the one true God. This is not a vision for submission, but a heartfelt worship, where people from every corner of the earth willingly bow before the Lord. Isaiah describes this future gathering with vivid imagery. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and all nations will stream to it. Isaiah 2, verse 2. The mountain of the Lord symbolizes God's presence and authority, and Isaiah envisions as a beacon, drawing people from every nation to come and worship. What's even more striking is who will be included in this gathering. Isaiah doesn't just speak of Israel or the faithful. He includes nations that were once enemies of God's people. Egypt and Assyria, two of the most powerful and often hostile nations in Isaiah's time, are specifically mentioned. In that day, there will be a highway from Egypt to Assyria. The Assyrians will go to Egypt and the Egyptians to Assyria. The Egyptians and Assyrians will worship together. Isaiah 19, verse 23. This is a stunning picture of reconciliation. These nations, which have been bitter rivals and oppressors, will one day stand side by side, united in their worship of God. Isaiah even goes so far as to say that God will bless them equally, calling them my people Egypt, my handiwork Assyria, and my inheritance Israel. Isaiah 19, verse 25. This is a powerful reminder that God's love and mercy extend to all people, regardless of their past. Isaiah's vision doesn't stop there. He describes a world transformed by God's presence, where peace and justice reign. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. Isaiah 2, verse 4. The instruments of war will be repurposed into tools for cultivating life, and the conflicts that have plagued humanity for centuries will come to an end. For the people of Isaiah's time, this vision would have been both comforting and challenging. Comforting because it assured them that God's plans were far greater than their current struggles. Challenging because it called them to see their enemies not as irredeemable foes, but as future brothers and sisters in worship. For us today, Isaiah's prophecy is just as relevant. We live in a world that is deeply divided by politics, race, religion, and more. Isaiah's vision challenges us to look beyond these divisions and see the bigger picture of God's plan. It reminds us that God's heart is for all people, and his desire is to bring them together in worship and unity. This vision also calls us to live as agents of reconciliation. While we may not see the full realization of Isaiah's prophecy in our lifetime, we can work toward breaking down barriers and building bridges. We can strive to reflect God's love and mercy to those who are different from us, knowing that one day, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. Philippians 2, verses 10 to 11. Isaiah's prophecy is a reminder that the story of humanity is not one of endless division and conflict. It's a story of redemption, reconciliation, and restoration. It's a story that culminates in a glorious gathering of all nations, united in worship of the God who created them and loves them. So, as we reflect on Isaiah's vision, let's allow it to fill us with hope. Let's look forward to that day when all nations will stream to the mountain of the Lord, when swords will be beaten into plowshares, and when former enemies will stand together as one. And let's live in a way that points toward that future, sharing God's love and grace with everyone we meet. This is the future Isaiah saw, and it's a future we can eagerly anticipate. The promise of a new heaven and a new earth. Hope for a transformed creation. Isaiah's prophecies reach their breathtaking climax with the promise of a new heaven and a new earth. A vision so profound and beautiful that it stirs the deepest longings of the human heart. This is not just a minor detail in his message. It's the ultimate fulfillment of God's plan for creation. Isaiah paints a picture of a world completely transformed, where pain, injustice, and brokenness are no more, and where God's presence brings eternal joy and peace. See, I will create new heavens and a new earth. The former things will not be remembered, nor will they come to mind. Isaiah 65, verse 17. With these words, Isaiah invites us to imagine a reality so radically different from our current experience that the struggles of the past will fade into distant memory. This is not a mere renovation of the old world, but complete renewal, a fresh start where everything is made right. Isaiah's description of this new creation is filled with vivid, hope-filled imagery. He speaks of a world where life flourishes in abundance. Never again will there be an infant who lives but a few days, or an old man who does not live out his years. Isaiah 65, verse 20. In this new reality, the pain of loss and the sting of death will be erased. People will live full, meaningful lives, free from the fear of tragedy or premature goodbyes. But the transformation goes even deeper. Isaiah envisions a world where justice reigns and oppression is no more. They will build houses and dwell in them. They will plant vineyards and eat their fruit. No longer will they build houses and others live in them, or plant and others eat. Isaiah 65, verses 21 to 22. In the new creation, the fruits of labor will belong to those who work for them, and exploitation will be a thing of the past. This is a world where fairness and equity are the norm, not the exception. Perhaps one of the most striking aspects of Isaiah's vision is the restoration of harmony between humanity and nature. The wolf and the lamb will feed together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. Isaiah 65, verse 25. This echoes Isaiah's earlier imagery of the peaceable kingdom, but here it takes on even greater significance. In the new heaven and new earth, the broken relationship between humans, animals, and the environment will be fully healed. Creation itself will be liberated from its groaning and restored to its intended glory. For the people of Isaiah's time, this promise would have been a source of immense hope. They lived in a world marked by suffering, injustice, and the consequences of sin. Isaiah's words reminded them that their present struggles were not the end of the story. God had a plan to make all things new, and that plan would one day come to fruition. For us today, this promise is just as powerful. We live in a world that often feels broken, a world of pain, inequality, and environmental degradation. Isaiah's vision reminds us that this is not the final chapter. God's plan is one of complete restoration, not just for humanity, but for all creation. This promise also challenges us to live with hope and purpose. While we may not see the full realization of the new heaven and new earth in our lifetime, we can work toward reflecting God's kingdom here and now. We can strive for justice, care for the vulnerable, and steward the earth with wisdom and compassion. Every act of love, every effort to bring healing, and every step toward justice is a glimpse of the future Isaiah described. Isaiah's prophecy is a reminder that the story of creation is not one of endless decay and despair. It's a story of redemption, renewal, and hope. It's a story that culminates in a glorious new heaven and new earth, where God's presence brings everlasting joy and peace. So, as we reflect on Isaiah's vision, let's allow it to fill us with hope. Let's look forward to that day when every tear will be wiped away, when pain and injustice will be no more, and when creation will be fully restored. And let's live in a way that points toward that future, sharing God's love and grace with everyone we meet. This is the promise of the new heaven and new earth, and it's a promise we can hold on to with confidence and joy. Isaiah's mission, a journey of suffering, resistance, and faithful testimony. Isaiah's life as a prophet was far from easy. His mission was one of profound significance, but it was also marked by suffering, resistance, and unwavering faithfulness to the God of Israel. From the moment he answered God's call, Isaiah stepped into a role that would demand everything from him, a role that would test his courage, his endurance, and his faith. It all began with a dramatic encounter with the divine. In Isaiah 6, we read about the prophet's vision of the Lord seated on a throne, high and exalted, with the train of his robe filling the temple. Seraphim flew above him, calling out, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory." Isaiah 6, verse 3. Overwhelmed by the holiness of God, Isaiah cried out, "Woe to me, I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty." Isaiah 6, verse 5. But God didn't leave Isaiah in his despair. A seraph touched his lips with a live coal from the altar, symbolizing the purification of his sins. Then came the call, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" Without hesitation, Isaiah responded, "Here am I, send me." Isaiah 6, verse 8. This moment marked the beginning of a mission that would define Isaiah's life. However, God's commission to Isaiah was not an easy one. He was told to deliver messages that many would reject. "Go and tell this people, Be ever hearing, but never understanding. Be ever seeing, but never perceiving. Make the heart of this people calloused. Make their ears dull and close their eyes. Isaiah 6 verses 9 to 10. Isaiah's words would often fall on deaf ears, and his warnings would be met with resistance and hostility. Despite this, Isaiah remained faithful. He spoke boldly against the sins of his people, calling out their idolatry, injustice, and hypocrisy. He confronted kings and leaders, warning them of the consequences of their actions. He endured ridicule, rejection, and even threats to his life. Yet, through it all, he never wavered in his commitment to God. Isaiah's suffering was not just external. It was deeply personal. He carried the weight of his people's rebellion and the knowledge of the judgment that would come. In Isaiah 20, we see an example of the lengths to which he went to deliver God's message. For 3 years, he walked around naked and barefoot as a sign of the humiliation that would come upon Egypt and Cush. This act of obedience was undoubtedly humiliating and painful, yet Isaiah did it without hesitation. But Isaiah's mission was not without hope. Even as he proclaimed judgment, he also carried a message of redemption and restoration. He spoke of a remnant that would remain faithful, a future Messiah who would bring salvation, and a new heaven and earth where God's justice and peace would reign. These promises sustained Isaiah and gave him the strength to persevere. Isaiah's life is a powerful example of what it means to be faithful in the face of adversity. He didn't choose the easy path. He chose a path of obedience, even when it cost him dearly. His story challenges us to consider our own commitment to God. Are we willing to stand firm in our faith, even when it's difficult? Are we prepared to speak the truth, even when it's unpopular? For those of us who feel weary or discouraged, Isaiah's journey is a reminder that our faithfulness is not in vain. God sees our struggles, and he is with us in the midst of them. Just as Isaiah's words continue to inspire and guide us today, our own lives can have a lasting impact when we remain steadfast in our testimony to God. Isaiah's mission was a journey of suffering, resistance, and faithful testimony. It was a journey that required courage, endurance, and an unshakable trust in the God of Israel. And it was a journey that ultimately points us to the hope we have in God's promises, a hope that sustains us no matter what challenges we face. So, as we reflect on Isaiah's life, let's be inspired by his example. Let's commit ourselves to living with the same faithfulness, courage, and hope, knowing that our labor in the Lord is never in vain. Isaiah's unwavering faith, a beacon of courage in the face of persecution and hardships. Isaiah's life was a testament to unwavering faith, a faith that remained steadfast even when faced with persecution, rejection, and immense hardship. His story is not just one prophetic ministry. It's a powerful example of what it means to trust God completely, even when the path ahead is fraught with challenges. Isaiah's courage in the face of adversity continues to inspire and challenge us today, reminding us that true faith is not shaken by circumstances. From the very beginning, Isaiah's mission was marked by difficulty. When God called him, he made it clear that Isaiah's message would often be met with resistance. Make the heart of this people callous. Make their ears dull and close their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn and be healed. Isaiah 6 verse 10. Imagine the weight of this calling. To speak truth to people who refuse to listen, to deliver messages that would often fall on deaf ears. Yet, Isaiah didn't hesitate. He said, "Here am I, send me." Isaiah 6 verse 8. Throughout his ministry, Isaiah faced relentless opposition. He confronted kings, leaders, and the people of Judah with messages of judgment and calls to repentance. His words were not always welcome. He was ridiculed, ignored, and even threatened. Yet, he never backed down. He remained faithful to his calling, even when it cost him dearly. One of the most striking examples of Isaiah's courage is found in his interactions with King Ahaz. When Judah was under threat from neighboring nations, Isaiah urged the king to trust in God rather than seeking alliances with foreign powers. He even offered Ahaz a sign from God to confirm his message, but Ahaz refused, choosing instead to rely on his own strategies. Isaiah's response was bold and unwavering. "Hear now, you house of David, is it not enough to try the patience of humans? Will you try the patience of my God also?" Isaiah 7 verse 13. Despite the king's rejection, Isaiah continued to proclaim God's truth. Isaiah's faithfulness wasn't just about speaking truth to power. It was also about enduring personal suffering. In Isaiah 20, we see the prophet walking naked and barefoot for 3 years as a sign of humiliation that would come upon Egypt and Cush. This act of obedience was undoubtedly humiliating and painful, yet Isaiah carried out without complaint. His willingness to endure such hardship for the sake of God's message is a powerful example of courage and dedication. Even in the face of widespread rejection, Isaiah's faith never wavered. He knew that his mission was not about winning popularity contests. It was about being faithful to God. He trusted that God's plans would ultimately prevail, even when the immediate circumstances seemed bleak. This unwavering faith is perhaps best captured in Isaiah's own words. "But you, Israel, my servant Jacob, whom I have chosen, you descendants of Abraham, my friend, I took you from the ends of the earth. From its farthest corners I called you. I said, you are my servant. I have chosen you and have not rejected you. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Isaiah 41 verses 8 to 10. Isaiah's life challenges us to examine our own faith. Are we willing to stand firm in our commitment to God, even when it's difficult? Are we prepared to face opposition, rejection, or even suffering for the sake of the gospel? Isaiah's example reminds us that true faith is not about avoiding hardship, but about trusting God in the midst of it. For those of us who feel weary or discouraged, Isaiah's story is a source of encouragement. It reminds us that we are not alone in our struggles. God is with us, just as he was with Isaiah. He strengthens us, upholds us, and gives us the courage to keep going, even when the road is hard. Isaiah's unwavering faith is a beacon of courage for all of us. It shows us that faith is not just about believing in God when things are easy. It's about trusting him when the storms rage. It's about standing firm in our testimony, even when the world pushes back. And it's about holding on to the hope that God's promises will never fail. So, as we reflect on Isaiah's life, let's be inspired by his example. Let's commit ourselves to living with the same unwavering faith, the same courage, and the same trust in God's faithfulness. No matter what challenges we face, we can stand firm, knowing that God is with us and that our labor in him is never in vain. Isaiah witnesses the miraculous healing of King Hezekiah, a sign of God's sovereign power. One of the most dramatic moments in Isaiah's ministry was his involvement in the miraculous healing of King Hezekiah. This event not only demonstrated God's power over life and death, but also served as a profound reminder of his sovereignty and faithfulness to those who trust in him. For Isaiah, it was a powerful testament to the God he served, a God who hears prayers, intervenes in impossible situations, and keeps his promises. The story unfolds during a time of great crisis for King Hezekiah. The king had fallen gravely ill, and the prophet Isaiah was sent to deliver a sobering message. This is what the Lord says, "Put your house in order, because you're going to die. You will not recover." Isaiah 38 verse 1. Imagine the weight of those words, not just for Hezekiah, but for Isaiah as well. He had to deliver a message of impending death to a king who had been a faithful servant of God. But Hezekiah's response was one of deep humility and faith. He turned his face to the wall and prayed earnestly to the Lord, weeping bitterly. He reminded God of his faithfulness and devotion, pleading for mercy. "Remember, Lord, how I have walked before you faithfully and with wholehearted devotion, and have done what is good in your eyes." Isaiah 38 verse 3. God heard Hezekiah's prayer. Before Isaiah had even left the palace courtyard, the Lord spoke to him again, instructing him to return to the king with a new message. "I have heard your prayer and seen your tears. I will add 15 years to your life, and I will deliver you and this city from the hand of the king of Assyria. I will defend the city." Isaiah 38 verses 5 to 6. What happened next was nothing short of miraculous. Isaiah instructed Hezekiah's servants to prepare a poultice of figs and apply it to the king's boil. As they did so, Hezekiah began to recover. But the healing wasn't just physical. It was also a sign of God's sovereign power. To confirm his promise, God gave Hezekiah a miraculous sign. He caused the shadow on the stairway of Ahaz to go back 10 steps. Isaiah 38 verse 8. This extraordinary event was a tangible reminder that the God of Israel is not limited by the laws of nature or the frailty of human life. For Isaiah, this event was a powerful affirmation of God's sovereignty. It reinforced the truth that God is in control of all things, life, death, time, and history. It also highlighted the importance of prayer and faith. Hezekiah's healing was not just a result of Isaiah's intervention. It was a response to the king's heartfelt cry to God. This miracle also had broader implications for the nation of Judah. At the time, the kingdom was under threat from the Assyrian Empire, and Hezekiah's illness had added to the sense of despair. His healing was not just a personal victory. It was a sign of hope for the entire nation. It demonstrated that God was still with his people, even in their darkest moments, and that he had the power to deliver them from their enemies. For us today, the story of Hezekiah's healing is a powerful reminder of God's faithfulness and power. It challenges us to trust in him, even when the situation seems hopeless. It reminds us that prayer matters, that God hears our cries and responds to our faith. And it reassures us that God is sovereign over every aspect of our lives, from our health to our circumstances to the timing of his plans. Isaiah's role in this miracle also teaches us about the importance of obedience and faithfulness. He was willing to deliver a difficult message, but he was also ready to proclaim God's mercy and power. His life reminds us that our role is to be faithful witnesses to God's truth, trusting that he will work in ways we cannot predict or fully understand. So, as we reflect on this incredible story, let's be encouraged by the God who heals, restores, and keeps his promises. Let's approach him with the same humility and faith that Hezekiah demonstrated, trusting that he is able to do immeasurably more than we can ask or imagine. And let's stand firm in our faith, like Isaiah, knowing that our God is sovereign over all things and that his power is made perfect in our weakness. Isaiah's final days, a legacy of faith and courage. As Isaiah's life drew to a close, his unwavering faith and commitment to God's mission remained as steadfast as ever. Even in the face of death, he stood firm, knowing that his life and testimony would serve as a beacon of light for future generations. Isaiah's final days were a powerful culmination of a life lived in obedience, courage, and trust in the God of Israel. Tradition holds that Isaiah's death was a martyr's death, a testament to his refusal to compromise his message or his faith. According to Jewish and early Christian sources, Isaiah was executed during the reign of King Manasseh, Hezekiah's son, who led Judah into idolatry and wickedness. Faced with the threat of death, Isaiah could have chosen to remain silent or flee. Instead, he continued to proclaim God's truth, even when it cost him his life. This final act of courage was consistent with the way Isaiah had lived his entire life. From the moment he answered God's call, he had been a voice of truth in a world filled with lies, a herald of hope in a time of despair, and a witness to God's sovereignty in the face of human pride and rebellion. His faithfulness in the face of death was a fitting end to a life marked by unwavering devotion to God. Isaiah's legacy, however, did not end with his death. His words, recorded in the book that bears his name, continue to inspire and guide people thousands of years later. His prophecies about the coming Messiah, the restoration of Israel, and the new heaven and new earth have provided hope and comfort to countless generations. His life serves as a powerful example of what it means to live with courage, faith, and purpose, even in the most challenging circumstances. For those who seek truth, Isaiah's story is a beacon of light. It reminds us that faith is not about avoiding suffering, but about trusting God in the midst of it. It challenges us to stand firm in our convictions, even when the world around us is hostile to the gospel. And it reassures us that our lives, when lived in obedience to God, can have an impact far beyond our own time. Isaiah's final days also point us to the ultimate source of hope, the God he served. Throughout his life, Isaiah had proclaimed the faithfulness and sovereignty of God. He had witnessed God's power in the miraculous healing of King Hezekiah, in the fulfillment of prophecies, and in the preservation of a remnant of faithful believers. As he faced death, Isaiah knew that his hope was not in this life, but in the God who holds eternity in his hands. For us today, Isaiah's life and legacy are called to live with the same courage and faith. They remind us that our faithfulness matters, even when the results are not immediately visible. They challenge us to trust in God's promises, even when the road ahead is uncertain. And they inspire us to leave a legacy that points others to the truth of God's word. As we reflect on Isaiah's final days, Let's be encouraged by his example. Let's commit ourselves to living with unwavering faith, knowing that our labor in the Lord is not in vain. Let's stand firm in the face of opposition, trusting that God is with us and that his plans will prevail. And let's live in such a way that our lives, like Isaiah's, become a beacon of light for those who seek truth. Isaiah's story is not just a historical account. It's a timeless reminder of the power of faith, the importance of obedience, and the hope we have in God's promises. May his life inspire us to live with courage, to trust in God's sovereignty, and to leave a legacy that glorifies him.